2021 Global Food Security Index. That's the last one that came out. South Africa is only in the moderate group now. We used to be in the good group, the light green group. So South Africa's food security situation relative to other countries is declining. We score very well on food affordability and on food safety and food and nutrition, but we do not score very well on availability, and that's also availability to hungry people that don't have the means to acquire food, and then also our resilience is not good. So we are sliding on food security, and we need to look at what those reasons and what those causes are and rectify those in this country. If we do not have a food secure South Africa, the whole region will be food insecure. We know that 40% of our exports go into Southern Africa or the SADC region. So this is a critical issue, and hungry people you cannot negotiate with. So food security, absolutely top of our engagement with government. But if you want food security, you also need competitiveness. And we're going to get to that. But just on the food security issue, our affordability is generally pretty good. Availability from time to time is not as good as it should be. And that's availability not just to the middle class and the rich, but also to the very poor. And unfortunately, we have a number of them in South Africa. Quality and safety generally very good, above average. And then our natural resilience to environmental effects is not on the good side, especially in terms of water, and then also our oceans, rivers, and lakes, the quality of the water, etc., and that we do not have enough storage, etc., and perhaps land degradation to a certain degree. So it's not a totally bleak picture. We're still the best in Africa, but the trend in which we are moving is not right. And this also goes then to our competitiveness. Now, we've seen this joint statement. This is unprecedented by the Food and Agricultural Organization of the United Nations, the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank Group, the World Food Program, and the World Trade Organization. All of them came together and issued a press statement on the global food security in July. This is absolutely unprecedented and just highlights the importance of food, the importance of our agricultural system in South Africa and in Southern Africa, and the pressures that we are facing. But again, I want to reiterate that we are probably in a better situation than most countries, and I'm talking even developed countries. Right, so the confidence in agriculture in South Africa, this graph illustrates very well how important South African agriculture has become. And if you show government this graph, they get very excited, and that is why government have placed agriculture right at the top of their priorities. You'll see it in the SONA speeches by the president. You'll see it in all the activities that government had. Agriculture has become a really top priority within government. And that's because, and this graph is in US dollar terms, so it takes the depreciation of the rand out. Up until 2007, we had a declining trade balance. And in 2007, we were importing more food than what we were exporting food. This is primary and secondary agriculture. But from 2007, there was a steady increase in our positive trade balance. In other words, exporting more than what we were importing. So our exports now are in excess of 12 billion US dollars. And you can multiply that by 16 or 17 rand to the dollar to get to a figure close to 200 billion rand. So it's very significant. In that time, our imports from 2011, 2012 have actually declined. So there's also import substitution happening. So we are starting to produce more of that we've been importing previously, which is also a very good sign. And that's why our positive trade balance helps to support our rand, because South Africa is running a positive trade balance primarily because of the agricultural positive trade balance, but also because of the hard commodities cycle that we're in. Our minerals, especially chrome, manganese, platinum to a certain degree, also are the other sector underpinning the strength of the rand. And that helps to also curb inflation if you run a positive trade balance. And with the oil price coming down, signs are definitely there for improvement. I think Nikki alluded to that very well in her presentation. So I don't want to go into that. We've also got to diversify our export regions. We've got to grow our markets if we want to grow agriculture, because we are basically saturated in terms of what we can produce in South Africa. And that was part of the whole master plan exercise, is to grow our markets. We must grow our markets so that we can grow our businesses, so that new entrants can get involved in the process. That's the only way that we can also improve our food security, both in South Africa and in the region. Confidence in the agricultural sector still remains more positive than negative. Yes, input prices are high, and there are risks around logistics, electricity, and we'll get into those just now. But commodity prices are still good, and there are still profits being realized in many sectors. If we look at growth in agriculture, both on a value basis and a volume basis, value and volume, that we will see since 2010, there's been positive growth in all the sectors of agriculture. The one thing that we saw in 2018, and this is from BFAP, is that if we do not change certain things, we're going to go into a flattening of our growth pattern. So we've got to bend that curve upwards. We've got to work closer with government around those constraining and barriers, constraining factors and barriers, to ensure that we create this growth scenario for agriculture. This was a graph from 2018. And fortunately, we've had good years since then. So the graph has gone a little bit more up than what it is indicated here, or was expected to go. But we've run into many other problems, especially around SOEs, which are hampering our competitiveness. And I'm going to get into that. Not going to go into too much detail here, except to say that we've got to get a strategy with government that creates a growth and an inclusive growth environment. Right, let's get to the subject of the day, the key SOEs in the agri-food value chain and their status. So if you look at the National Government Directory, there are 128 state-owned enterprises and also other public entities. They divided basically into 3 different schedules, and you can go and Google that. The most important to the agri-food sector is firstly Eskom, and you had a good presentation from Andre de Ruyter on that, explaining exactly what's happening. There's secondly Transnet, which has a huge monopoly on logistics, especially around the rail, the ports, the fuel pipeline, which are all incredibly important to the agricultural sector, its competitiveness and its growth. The National Ports Authority, which is aligned to Transnet. In fact, it was part of Transnet, and now they have separated, which was a very good move, obviously. There's the Land and Agricultural Bank of South Africa, very much in the news at the moment, also with its problems. The Agricultural Research Council, the National Agricultural Marketing Council, Honest to Put Biological Products, and especially with foot and mouth disease rampant, African swine fever, avian flu, and a host of other problems that we have in the biosecurity sphere, a critical institution which is not working even close to optimal performance. There's NEDLAC, where I'm very involved in still. Then there's the Industrial Development Corporation, Perishable Products Export Control Board, which many of you are familiar with. And then also the Competition Commission, which obviously is looking at the whole food situation and price increases in the food environment with magnifying glass to see that there is no price gouging and abuse of the high inflation environment in which we are in. Fortunately, we have good contact with them and keeping them well informed of what's happening in the sector. So these are probably the most important ones. You're welcome to, if there were others that you want to add or would like me to address, I can do that. I'm familiar with practically all these institutions, very familiar in certain cases, so we can give you a bit of a rundown what's happening. Perhaps just on Eskom, we all know that Eskom is in dire straits. We all know that the president has now announced a 10-point plan around that. Transnet is a massive problem. I'll get into that detail. The land bank, also a problem, a real problem, especially around development finance. The Agricultural Research Council, also a problem, but there are other moves to alleviate some of the important work that the ARC did in the past. NAMC is working okay. OBP, massive problem. NEDLAC is working okay, but it doesn't always have the teeth that it should have. IDC working okay. PPECB, I think, is working okay. In fact, I think quite well. Julian Janssen and his team, and then also the board, are doing a good job. Competition Commission, at least we have good contact with them now. We didn't always, and at least they understand better how things work. They brought out an analysis of what's happening in the agro-food sector, which was really poor about a year or two ago. We criticized them because they had not consulted industry at all. They didn't have a clue how it works. And they're now working with industry to redo that study and to understand how the system works. Okay, so let's go to the options and opportunities for private sector. Now, there's quite a lot of wording here, and I'm not going to go through all of that, but it's very important that you know that a lot is being done to rectify the problems. The so-called network industries, or SOEs, that are supposed to enhance the competitiveness of South Africa's economy, but specifically also the agro-food sector, has now become a disenabler or a disabler of our competitiveness. So it is breaking down the competitiveness that we've built up with our systems over time and being able to put our product on the international market. If you're uncompetitive, it is impossible for you to put your product on the international market and still make a profit, because your cost factor for logistics, inefficiencies in the port, etc., just becomes too high. So one must understand that they are undermining our competitiveness, whether it's electricity, whether it's logistics, and various of the others that I have mentioned. So there are 10. There's a 10-point plan that the president announced. He consulted us in business, and I was part of that meeting beforehand. We drafted extensive proposals for him. Practically all those proposals have been adopted by government. There are many that are in favor also in favor of private sector. It's really is a move to privatization, if you want to call it that, or in public-private partnerships. But it is enabling private sector to generate its own electricity, basically without a license anymore. This has been coming for a couple of years. We have been instrumental in driving that for a while now. Also, that the Eskom will start buying more electricity from independent power producers. Business and households will be encouraged to install rooftop solar and connect this to the grid, except for their own generation, also to can then sell into the grid. Obviously, there's detail that still has to be sorted out around the tariffs, how this is done, where this is done, how it connects to the grid. Those practical considerations still have to be sorted out. And then there will be a National Energy Crisis Committee on which business will also sit to ensure that we have first hands of direct link into the presidency on the energy crisis. So I think we're in the right direction. It's going to take time for us to move and to get over the load shedding and to have a steady, consistent supply of energy that will attract the investment that Nikki Weimar correctly alluded to, etc. But I want to say to most agribusinesses and farmers, which I will say agribusinesses, most of them, is really start looking at generating your own electricity. The technology is there. You can really get loans from banks. Practically all the loans, the easiest place to get loans now from banks is around green energy, etc. So talk to your banks, see what's possible to start generating and creating your own capacity in terms of getting off the grid and perhaps even selling into the grid at some stage, but making sure that you yourself are energy secure. This is not just, it's also a consideration, not just from a security point of view, but also from a cost point, because Eskom's electricity is going to become more and more expensive over time still, and probably at a higher rate than the inflation rates. And you've got to see to how you can beat that. I think this is one aspect, perhaps where Deirdre can help you to see who the good suppliers are, do the business plans of these, check what can work for the different pack houses, for different irrigation schemes, and where you need electricity. So this is one thing that farmers, agribusinesses alike have to move fast. There are also the incentives around your carbon footprint, which is going to be very important to access, especially the European market. I think Andre de Ruyter alluded to that this morning. And then also, once the carbon market starts working in South Africa, and we believe that will be very soon because of the Carbon Tax Act that is coming into implementation now, you will actually be able to sell carbon credits where you can prove that you have delivered on those carbon credits. You can actually make money out of carbon credits. These are all options and possibilities that farmers will need to look at coming up, and these are pretty soon. Also, if you want to get access, for example, into the European market. If we look at the logistics situation, there's a 5-point plan that business has drafted now that we're speaking to government. It's detailed. I'm not going to go into any of the detail of this, but the South African Association of Freight Forwarders, especially Dr. Unita Maria, has done incredible work on this. And it's still in draft form, so just keep it fairly confidential. But we are working on the restructuring of Transnet. Transnet is responsible and plays a massive role in the supply chains in South Africa. But Transnet Freight Rail, Transnet Engineering, Transnet National Ports Authority, although that is splitting off now, as I indicated, Transnet Port Terminals and then the Transnet pipelines are incredibly important to the agricultural sector. Now, the South African port model is pretty distinctive in terms of international best practice. Practice with both public and private operators, but this model has serious misalignment and has resulted in poor performance at the ports. And the World Bank has put us right at the bottom of the pile in terms of performance at the port. So we need to restructure this whole way that our ports work. Now, we are busy in talks with Transnet. We had a meeting last night with the big wigs again with Transnet. Around some of these issues around restructuring, but also around the current operations. At least we're talking to each other. At least we're using a lot of congestion analysis. We're using big data with CRICMA and the South African Association of Freight Forwarders, analyzing every single truck that comes in to Durban, for example, using big data. And analyzing it to see how we can get a turnaround time of 95 minutes per truck into Durban Port. So we're using new technology, new artificial intelligence, etc., to see how we can become more efficient in the ports. Last night they were telling us generally we up on efficiency by more than 3% on last year. This time, and in some ports up to 30% more efficient than what we were last year. So there is some good news. It's going to take time. It's going to take a mindset shift also within Transnet, but at least I can assure you that there's really good cooperation now between Transnet and private sector to try and see how we can be more efficient. I'm just using this as an example. As to how we are getting slowly but surely, we're getting the average time in Durban Port that a truck would spend down, so that we can relieve the congestion, for example, in Durban Port. But there are many other issues that we're looking at. I mean, I was really instrumental in helping the Maputo open up also for agricultural products. So this past year was a pilot project. But it's really looking good to get more product out through Maputo, which would also then relieve some of the pressure on Durban. So there are a whole lot of initiatives that we are looking at. We're also looking at initiatives in terms of leasing equipment, because Transnet has a shortage of cranes, of tensioners, of various things that they just don't even have the capital to buy. to see how we can take hands to make sure, also in Cape Town Port, to become more efficient in the process. Because once we can get our ports working better and more efficiently and more cost effectively, it will certainly enhance the competitiveness of our agricultural process. So the second one is to create a coordinated approach between regulatory bodies. Now, we have the SOEs, but we also have DPE, the Department of Private Enterprises, and we also have, very importantly, Department of Transport. And the Department of Transport, with all due respect, are practically nowhere, but they are responsible for policy. And we are seeing a huge problem from their side in terms of understanding what the issues are and addressing these issues. So we need some sort of formal engagement structure with the Department of Transport, with private sector, with DPE, to make sure that we get back to moving our cargo more on rail and less on road, and get a better split in terms of cargo on rail and cargo on road. So this is one of the big initiatives that we will need to follow up. The third one is a coordinated approach for our land borders and bilateral agreements. Massive problems at all our border posts, whether it's Musina, Lebombo border post. I see Groblersbrug is starting to becoming a real problem now, and we need to address our border post through a one-stop border post, implementation. That legislation has already passed through NEDLAC, and to make sure that it works and to make sure that our ports are working 24/7. At least we've managed that with the Maputo port, not with the Maputo port, with the border post leading to Maputo port, the Lebombo Kumari port border post. So these are major issues that we are busy with to enhance these border posts, to create the right capacity, to get the system development, to get the policing right, to make sure that these border posts work efficiently. They are of our biggest problems in terms of trade, also agricultural trade. The fourth one is the rail policies and alignment. And there has been some talk for some time in terms of public-private partnerships and getting the sidelines, private operators on the sidelines, especially the grain companies, for example. Now, this hasn't taken off because it hasn't made business sense. They need to open the main lines as well to private sector participation and private sector investment. Now, it does appear there's still a lot of negotiation on this, but the signs are really positive that government is now starting to see that if they don't make it viable, or if they don't make it viable for private sector, we are not going to get the privatization on the rail network to make it work for us. The infrastructure collapse and the theft of copper cables, the poor maintenance of infrastructure is just horrendous in our rail industry. And so to turn this around is going to take a massive effort. And private sector can play a role, and we will have to see. But this will be more from a big business point of view and agribusinesses, but they are already starting to look at what those opportunities are and can make the necessary investment if it makes business sense. Right, then the fifth one is to create a business model to foster PSPs. PSPs are actually private sector partnerships. It's just it's the same as public-private partnerships. They just call it PSPs. And we and government, and again, primarily from the president's side, is driving hard to unleash or create an environment in which private sector can invest. And we've seen it from the renewables, the massive investment taking place in the renewable energy sector from private sector firms, both in the mining sector especially, but also from other institutional investors, is massive. As long as you create the opportunity and it's viable and makes business sense, you will get private sector investment. The energy space is showing that, and the same will be for the logistics. So we are fairly confident that we will get into this position, but it does take some hard bargaining and hard negotiation on this process. We must remember in South Africa that labor and many others caught in old age ideological traps. I don't know what else to call it. They are still stuck against us. They still want the government to be a developmental state, and it has failed hugely in this regard. It really is only business and private sector that can help this country to get back onto a growth path, to create jobs, alleviate poverty, and create a more stable society for all, for our children, etc., in the process. Okay, so these are getting these models right is going to be the crux. We are working flat out with detailed documents on these to look at contract duration, investment requirements, throughput targets, performance standards, fees and tariffs. All these are now and the licensing. So all these are now on the table for negotiation and for finalization. Right, let's just look at some of the other issues too. The land bank. I happen to be a director of the land bank from 2012 to 2015, so at that stage it was working really pretty well. But it's not working well at the moment. The land bank from about 2018 went into serious default situations. They adopted certain models, certain financing processes that were too risky, to be quite honest, and now we've landed in trouble. And this is now spilling over as they try to claw back into problems in the agricultural sector. So there are alternatives to the land bank through the commercial sector, and that could be either through banks and through agribusinesses. I don't think you can get a loan from the land bank at the moment. As the information I have is that they've stopped all loans. They're actually clawing back on loans to make sure that they can remain capital adequate, and so that they can service their loans that they have. They have to access capital on the capital markets, and to do that with their current structure is impossible. So they actually have to shrink considerably and pull back and claw back on their loans, get their loans repaid if they want to be a viable business. And that's part of the problem that's happening now. So if you've got business in the land bank, if you can move it, do so. Don't quote me on that, but I think everybody knows that it is risky at the moment, and I would suggest that there are other alternatives. Many, a lot of the land bank book has now already gone into both the commercial banks and into many agribusinesses. Remember, if you go into a loan, make sure that you understand you have to repay that loan, and there are certain terms and conditions under which you have to do that. It's a business transaction, and you and the person that you go into that agreement with will and can have recourse to the courts on that process. But it's a one-to-one relationship, and it differs from person to person. So just make sure that you choose reputable banks and financiers in the process. Second one is be aware of your legal obligations when entering loan agreements. That was I was alluding to. Land bank is in a very difficult situation, even with excellent management, and there are some good people there now. It will take years to resolve. It will not be the old land bank that we knew, and it will play a much smaller role. This unfortunately has a couple of spin-offs, consequences that I will get into. We must remember that the government is not going to bail out the land bank. It might extend guarantees. It's already at its limit of guarantees to the land bank, but that's not a cash bailout. And it's just to keep the land bank afloat. The two problems that we have with the land bank now is that long-term finance generally in agriculture is a major risk, especially fixed assets such as farm or land purchases, because your banks and your agribusinesses usually do short-term financing and not 20-year type financing for land or for fixed assets. So that market is definitely starting to impact on land purchases across South Africa. And it's something that we will have to watch, and something that we will have to engage on with also your commercial financiers. Because if we lose the value of our farms because we can't get farm trades or farm purchases and selling, then we're going to land into a problem in South Africa, because that is your basis of your security very often. The second one that's a problem is your developing agriculture is going to suffer. because they had a focus on developing agriculture, establishing new farmers, etc. And this is basically dried up, or there are going to be very few loans in this regard. And again, this will have to come from private sector, and they only have a limited capacity for that risk for developing agriculture. So these are two of the major consequences or impacts that we will have to watch closely going forward. Finance is a worry in South African agriculture at the moment. Right, if we look at other SOEs, the Agricultural Research Council, I used to work for them for 20 years. Yes, the Agricultural Research Council is not what it used to be, not even remotely. A lot of problems. They play much less of a role, but fortunately, that service of innovation and science has to a large degree moved to the private sector, with some pockets of excellence still prevailing in the Agricultural Research Council, and that we fund. I still sit on the Maize Trust. We still fund, for example, certain research projects with him, but far fewer than what we did in the past. We've had very detailed discussions with the Department of Science, Technology and Innovation to see how we can also take hands with them to make sure that our services in terms of research and technology in the agriculture, agri-food sector are still being serviced properly, because that's where our efficiencies come from. That's where our competitiveness comes from technology. Secondly, the NAMC, the MAP Act, the Marketing of Agricultural Products Act, is going to be revised soon. Generally, the NAMC doing a pretty good job. I know the CEO and the senior agriculturalists there pretty well. He worked for me, Sofiso Ntombela. I think generally it's working okay. They've played a big role also with the so-called master plan, and generally we still have an open market economy, a market-driven economy in agriculture, and we must maintain that at all costs. It's non-negotiable from private sector side. OBP, major problem, and the whole thing with foot and mouth disease is a major problem. I think there were a very important meeting last night with the Minister and Industry and also with the department and the police, even bringing in certain controls now to stop the movement of cattle and livestock, because the FMD is now just getting out of hand. So this is a major area. We import vaccines from Botswana now. We don't make enough, or not nearly sufficiently enough. The positive is there are now two major labs or production facilities, both in Gauteng, being put up and starting to develop vaccines, etc. And again, this is private sector will have to take over this very important function. It's going to have to be privatized, and it will happen naturally. NEDLAC is a useful platform, and we must keep using it. I think we were all positioned there. Industrial Development Corporation doing pretty well. Not so much. They are involved in the agriculture space, very selective in terms of what they finance and so on. They're looking to play a bigger role because they are in a pretty good position, and we know that they have been instructed as such by the presidency as well. So they're looking to play a bigger role. In my mind, it's definitely somebody that you can look to in terms of financing or even equity in new ventures, etc. They look at new ventures primarily. Then there's Perishable Products Export Control Board, Julian Janssen and his team. I think they're doing pretty well. Yes, now and then there are hiccups, but as far as I ascertain, they're doing well for agriculture. We need them. And in the Competition Commission, as I indicated, they're already busy with a new agro-food system study, and they're doing it with organized agriculture so that they can better understand at least how the systems work. Really been a problem. Okay, so to wrap up, we still have a relatively healthy and robust agro-food industry due to the open market system. But yes, we face various risks and challenges, especially also from the SOE service, which is now our biggest detractor in terms of competitiveness. We have various challenges. We know them all. I'm not even going to list them. But we also have opportunities, and Nikki Weimar alluded to that. People must eat, and We have growing markets in Africa, growing markets especially in Asia, growing markets across the world actually. And through new technologies, improved productivity, we can unlock those opportunities. We must just remember that we in South Africa can ons boer maak 'n plan. Ons kan planne maak. We know how to be resilient. We know how to think around things and get the right way. Many other countries are in a far worse, even our competitors are in a far worse situation than what we are. So if we use this crisis properly, we can actually gain a comparative advantage in the medium to long run. So this is what we should be positioning ourselves for. The industry is a major contributor to food security, economic growth, and employment. It is a massive South African asset, and everybody will tell you that. South Africa's food system is not a minor role player as it was perceived to be in the past. It really now is a major priority for government and for people in South Africa. And we have positioned it well. We're in a much better position now than what we were 10 years ago and even 20 years ago. But we live in uncertain times. There are many risks, many variables, some we can control, others not or less so. We need to talk to government. We need to talk to other role players in South Africa. We cannot sit on an island, so we have to look at social compacting or master plans so that we can bring greater certainty to all role players and stakeholders, and to create a common vision and a unity of purpose for inclusive growth. If we can do that, if we can achieve that, then our future is far more rosy, is far more certain. And this is what we have to work at. We're always going to get detractors, but sometimes we must just let them go and shout from the stands. We've got to be on the playing field to play the game. You can only score if you're on the game. As jy in die installasie sit, of in die paviljoene sit, lekker om te skree, maklik om te skree, maar jy kry eintlik niks reg nie. Jy druk nie 'n 3 nie. Dit is net as jy op die speelveld is, as jy daar is, waar dit saak maak, is wanneer jy punte aanteken. So, there are risks in this process. We're not saying there are no risks. Everything in life has risks. Even crossing a street has risks. But we must take calculated risks, and we must make sure that we manage those risks as best possible. So thank you, Chair. I hope this adds to your discussion and your meeting today. Thank you very much for the opportunity. I'll be happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Okay, and I can mute myself.
'n Ongekende, diep dankbare, diep seer, maar 'n aangename voorreg om vir Santam Landbou ook hier by die Agri Limpopo Kongres te verteenwoordig. It is a real and true honor, and thank you for the opportunity to share a bit of our passion within the insurance industry to all of you. Versekering is ek oortuig in my hart is 'n goddelike beginsel. Ons almal dra by tot 'n poel, en wanneer ek die slagoffer word van skade of verlies, dan begin die woordjie versekering met 'n V, wat vir my baie belangrik raak om by 'n volgende woord uit te bring, om te sê versekering verseker jou volhoubaarheid. Dit is 'n belegging in jou voortbestaan. En ons het 'n ryke geskiedenis by Santam. Meer as 104 jaar oud is ons die voorkeurvernoot ook van ons boere daar buite. En baie interessant, die heel eerste polis, the first policy that was written in the history of Santam was an agriculture policy. Volhoubaarheid, ons het verlede jaar weer die rekord herskryf met eise uitbetalings R24.5 biljoen. But at Santam, insurance and our commitment is not only limited to indemnity, but a commitment far and beyond. And here, in humbleness, is the acknowledgement that we do our part in terms of our ethos, insurance good and proper. A wonderful opportunity to showcase our commitment as we contributed 3 million towards the Agri-Drought Relief Fund. We were the first insurance company who also contributed 2017 to the Knysna fires, R1 million towards the disaster fund. Die jaar daarna, 2018 en ook hierdie jaar, KZN en ook Oos-Kaapse vloede, R1.3 miljoen en R1 miljoen. En ons kan ook wys en bevestig dat ons werklik kan saamwerk. We can unite as insurance companies, and this year, with the wonderful picture of the helicopter, we, 6 of our insurance company came together and we sponsored 2 Bell Huey firefighter helicopters. Nou, geagte kongresgangers, hierdie is 'n bevestiging dat ons werklik uit ons pad uitgaan om die verskil te maak. And I'm going to end off to say, yes, there is a totally wrong and incorrect perception or an assumption that insurance is expensive. Dit is alles behalwe waar. Ek gaan eerder die opmerking aanvaar en ondersteun om te sê, dit gaan vir jou baie duurder kos om nie te verseker nie. And here's the proof. If I want to insure a building against fire-related perils to the amount of R1 million, my annual premium will be R2.5. R208 'n maand en ons is bereid om 'n risiko van R1 miljoen te vat. Al het ek 1 maand se premie betaal en ek het 'n totale verlies, is jou skadeloosstelling R1 miljoen. Order in the open, 1 million, 9,000 per annum, 750 per month. And yes, you might ask, but hey, why is it more expensive? Onthou, voer in die ope, brand 'n baie groter risiko. The same principle will apply for livestock irrigation systems gain, fire perils, some insured R1 million, 5,000 per annum, R417 per maand. Ons het onlangs ook 'n jongboer beoordelingssessie gedoen waar 'n jongboer gesê dat hy 20 vee deur een weerligslag verloor het. Vir hom, sy skade was R250,000. Dit is skrikwekkend om te sien dat hy net 1,500 jaar premie sou betaal. Vir my is die belangrikste vir die boere die aanspreeklikheidsgedeelte, ongelooflik belangrike afdeling, die goedkoopste afdeling. Ek is die grootste ondersteuner ook van Sambreel aanspreeklikheid wat 'n veilige vangnet, 'n afdeling is wat sê sodra eis van R1 miljoen onder aanspreeklikheid betaal is, dan betaal ons vir jou tot en met die verdere R20 miljoen. I urge you, speak to your broker as Santam wants to do business with our farmers out there. Ek sluit af my opregte gebed, mag jy met soveel goedheid, soveel guns, verbygevat sal word en wees die verskilmaker en die beste jy. Be the best you that the Lord created you to be. Agri Limpopo, elke kongresganger, ek bedank julle uit my hart uit vir die voorreg dat Santam Landbou op hierdie prestige platform ook 'n deelnemer mag wees.
Dr. John, soos gewoonlik, ek moes jou lankal al geknyp het op die tyd, maar dit wat jy gee is so insiggewend. Ons kon nie afknyp nie. Reg, ons het 'n paar vrae. Ek gaan afskop. Ons het jou spesifiek gevra om 'n bietjie uit te brei oor die SOEs vir die omskepping van hierdie state-owned enterprises na private-public participation. Maar daar is 'n enorme, huidigelik 'n enorme kniehalter in die kontrakte van die PPP's. Ek sal graag van jou af wil tweeledig hoor, hoe lyk die tydraamwerk vir die werk aan hierdie PPP kontrakte En die omskakeling van SOE's en watter van hulle is daar of is daar 'n moontlikheid dat daar aan gewerk word?
Ja, ek dink dit is 'n baie goeie vraag en ek dink as ons eerstens kyk na die elektrisiteitssituasie, die president het gesê dat enige lisensies en enige red tape moet so vinnig as moontlik uit die weg geruim word sodat mense krag kan opwek. So ek dink wat dit aanbetref is dat word dan nie te kan besighede of ondernemings kan baie vinnig beweeg. Ek dink oor die logistiek gaan dit moeiliker wees. Dit gaan tyd vat want daai moet nog steeds eers in beleid vasgevat word. Dit is nog nie eers ordentlik in beleid vasgevat nie. En dan tweedens mag dit ook wees dat dit in wetgewing vasgevat moet word want wetgewing volg op beleid. So dit kan tyd neem. Dit is die jammerte daarvan. Uiteraard sal ons van ons kant afspook om dit te bespoedig soveel as moontlik waar ons betrokke is en dit sterk probeer promoveer met die regering. Ek dink die regering besef ook dat ons het nie tyd nie. Ons het 'n baie klein venster van geleentheid nog oor om hierdie goed reg te ruk. Ek dink wat mens moet doen is en miskien moet julle op 'n stadium 'n werksvonkeltjie daaroor hou met mense wat diensverskaffers in hierdie gebied is om te kyk wat kan julle self doen om die bottlenecke wat julle het met die sogenaamde netwerkindustrie of die SOE's, hoe julle daai te bowe kan kom. Ek dink hierdie is 'n saak wat ook by AgriSA uiteraard bespreek sal word. Ek dink ek gaan betrokke wees by hulle kongres om 'n paar van hierdie sake ook aan te roer. Hierdie is nie 'n ding wat een ou sommer op sy eie kan aanpak nie. Dit gaan 'n daadwerklike groot poging van die hele besigheid van Suid-Afrika neem. Natuurlik met landbou ook, maar binne landbougeleedere ook. Om seker te maak ons kan die uitdagings en die probleme, barriers, ek weet nie wat ou dit alles wil noem nie, kan oorkom in so kort tydjie as moontlik. Ons moet planne maak en natuurlik binne die wet om seker te maak ons waardeketings werk. Ek hoop dit antwoord jy, maar ek het nie 'n spesifieke tydraamwerk nie. Ek is bekommerd dat van hierdie gaan te lank vat want ons weet hoe stadig werk die regering. En hulle het nog 'n klomp politieke prosesse wat hulle ook nog moet oorkom in hierdie situasie. Dis nie alles 'n gegewe nie, want jy moet onthou, binne 'n regering baie is nie ten gunste van hierdie sogenaamde public-private partnerships of PSP's of selfs privatisering, wat ook al jy dit wil noem nie. Ons weet, dis die enigste oplossing. Baie in die regering weet dit nou. Maar want hulle het dit gesien uit 'n dierles wat hulle geleer het. Maar hierdie ding gaan nog 'n politieke speelbal ook nog word wat dit verder gaan vertraag. Maar ons moet planne maak. Daar's geen twyfel by my nie. Dit wat ons kan doen, moet ons self doen, so ver as wat ons moontlik kan. Ek hoop dit antwoord jou vraag.
Dankie Dr. John. Weet, ek het nooit gedink ek sal die dag hoor dat jy uit jou mond uit sê in die openbaar ons boere moet vir hulle self planne maak om elektrisiteit te voorsien nie. Dit beteken of dit sin speel op hoe diep ons eintlik in die verknorsing is. En ek dink tereg het jy gesê die politieke uitdaging wat die ANC huidiglik het en hulle bestel is veel groter en dit is nie so maklik oplosbaar nie. Ek gaan afsluit met die vraag want hulle het almal eintlik te doen hiermee en net vir jou sê baie dankie en baie dankie vir die rol wat jy speel in ons industrie en in die breër konteks van industrie. Dankie vir jou insette.
Baie dankie en baie dankie weer eens vir die voorreg om saam met julle 'n paar gedagtes te kon deel en baie sterkte vir julle.